What are you going to be doing between now and 2015?
There's a lot to do. I have to become trained to a higher level than I already am on the American segment. So that's the American laboratory, the European laboratory, and the Japanese laboratory. I also have to be trained on the Russian segment. And in addition to that, the Canadian robotic arm. I have to go to Canada and become more highly qualified on that. During my increment, at the moment, there are currently three visiting vehicles planned that will require the robotic arm use. That's 2 SpaceX and 1 HTV, the Japanese cargo vehicle. And those three don't dock automatically to the station, so they'll hover about 10 meters below the station, and the astronauts have to use the robotic arm to capture it and then berth it to the station. In addition to 2 Progress vehicles which will dock automatically, so it's going to be a very busy expedition, a lot of vehicle traffic.
What about the training you've done so far, particularly the training in caves, which was simulating being on an asteroid? Is that all redundant now?
Not at all. I mean, that training all stays with you, and I learned some really valuable lessons during that caving expedition. 7 days living underground with a mixture of astronauts from various different nationalities, and we actually simulated a space mission during that caving trip. We were doing real scientific research. In fact, we found new microbiological life forms in this cave in Sardinia, which was excellent. We were doing true exploration, and also we were doing cave photography, which is clearly an important part of an astronaut's role as well. And in addition to that, of course, the main point of living in a cave was to explore those psychosocial skills of interaction, of decision making, leadership, followership, etc. So that when you become this international crew on board the station, you're able to work together as a team much better.
How is your Russian? What level are you at the moment?
Well, officially it's intermediate. Mid was the level that I was classified at my last exam. I'll need to do that exam again in the near future, and the Russian language lessons will continue right up until launch. It's clearly a very important part of our job is to be able to converse in Russian, and especially during the Soyuz launch and recovery. And if the opportunity arose to do a Russian spacewalk, that would all be purely dealt with in Russian.
It's a long duration space mission. Do you know at this stage already what the 5 months is likely to include?
Not in terms of specific science activities, no, it's too early to tell. And similarly, with regards to those visiting vehicles I was talking about and the spacewalks as well, or the opportunity for spacewalks, that tends to all change around at this stage, and it gets firmed up within about 12 months prior to the mission. But clearly the space station has got fixed payloads on board in terms of the science laboratories, and that's a biological laboratory, fluid physics, material science, human physiology, medical research. So there will be a mix of experiments in those kind of areas.
Having our first British official astronaut is going to be a huge boost for STEM subjects, people wanting to study science, technology, engineering, maths. What's your science background?
My science background is at A level in maths, physics and chemistry, and
that's pretty good.
Which is okay. As I did have an interest in it. Wasn't art and history and languages. It was very science sort of based. And then I had a big decision to make, because I was going to go to Manchester University to study aeronautical engineering, but the Army Air Corps had offered me a place at Sandhurst to go on to do pilot training. And at that time, pilot training, as it is today, is quite a long, drawn-out process. So I decided that it was better to get on with that and leave school after A-levels to go to Sandhurst. And I ended up doing my degree, my Bachelor of Science in Flight Dynamics. I did that later in life whilst I was a test pilot.
And that has an enormous amount of engineering in it, as well as actually learning to fly.
Yes, it has a lot of mathematics and also engineering, yeah. But in addition to that, physics has always remained a kind of hobby of mine. On my bookshelf, I just have dozens of books on ranging from sort of quantum physics to A-level schoolbook physics, which I just like to pick up and have a read through.
Do you think your background as a pilot has helped you to where you are today?
Absolutely. I mean, that really it was my background as a pilot that gave me the skills and qualifications when the European Space Agency had their selection process. And I was a pilot then with just over 3,000 hours as a qualified test pilot and a degree. But I think it was really the fact of my experience as a pilot that helped with the application process.
I mean, it's quite a traditional, old-fashioned route in a way. You know, the Right Stuff days, there were always test pilots. Did you want to be an astronaut then right from the beginning? Was that always at the back of your mind, or did the idea not come until later?
It wasn't really at the back of my mind, purely because the opportunities weren't there, and so I don't think a lot of people in the UK didn't think that they could become an astronaut unless, as like Michael Foale, Nick Patrick and Piers Sellers, unless you were to move over to NASA, in which case you did have the opportunity. So as soon as I saw the European Space Agency open up their selection process in 2008, including UK nationals, and I had the right qualifications at the right time, that's when I jumped on board.
Now, a lot has been made of the amount of money that's effectively behind you, £60 million. What's in it for the UK?
Well, there's so much in it for the UK. I mean, it's a relatively modest investment, and we're going to get a huge return. We currently get about a 4-to-1 return on all the money that the UK pays into the European Space Agency. Now, in terms of science, this 16 million meant that we joined the ELIPS program, which is the International Space Station Science Program. So British scientists are now able to propose British-led experiments in microgravity, and hopefully we're going to see some of those on board the International Space Station. So it's opened up the door, if you like, to the whole British science community to start studying microgravity research. In addition to that, it's opened up the door for UK industry to compete for bids and to actually be awarded contracts by the Space Agency. And we have a thriving space industry, so there's many different contracts that can be awarded. And I think possibly more importantly than that, it's an inspiration to our younger generation of scientists and engineers that science is exciting, space is exciting, and you have these opportunities available to you.
Commander Chris Hadfield has sort of upped the game on the inspirational aspect of being an astronaut. Does this put an enormous amount of pressure on you to be sort of all singing, all dancing, performance, social media expert, etc.?
It does put a certain amount of pressure on, yes, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, but having said that, he has just done a fantastic job, and in many respects, we are just, in this sort of astronaut community, in the human spaceflight community, we're extremely grateful for the fact that he has done such a good job, not just in his educational outreach and reaching out to the general public and getting them to enthuse again about human spaceflight, and from viewing their planet from the pictures and from watching him do the scientific experiments, but also as a commander of the space station, he did a fantastic job in terms of the activities that were performed, the amount of science that they performed during that increment. So he certainly has set the bar very high, but I thrive on the challenge, so I will look forward to it.